Welcome to the deep dive. Okay, today we're diving straight into, well, one of the most intricate and, frankly, enduring conflicts shaping our world. We're talking about the complex relationship between Iran, Israel, and America. And this isn't just about, the latest headlines. Our sources make it really clear this is a multifaceted challenge. It's woven from historical grievances, political maneuvering, deep ideological rifts, economic pressures, and, yeah, critical strategic dimensions. Our mission today, basically to be your shortcut. We've gone through the source material you shared with us, and we're here to pull out the most important nuggets of knowledge and insight. The aim is to give you a truly well-informed perspective on this critical global issue, trying to cut through the noise, provide some clarity.
That's exactly right. Understanding this dynamic, it isn't really about just reacting to the latest news bite. It's more about connecting dots that stretch across decades, across continents. By the end of this deep dive, you'll have a much clearer perspective on not just what is happening, but crucially why. Why these key players are acting the way they are, based directly on the material we've looked at.
Okay, so let's unpack this right from the beginning then.
Yeah.
How did these nations, some of them once had surprisingly friendly ties. How did they reach this point of what's essentially a shadow war?
Yeah, it's quite striking when you look back before 1979. Our sources show that before the Iranian Revolution, Iran and Israel actually had, well, friendly ties. Iran was, notably, the second Muslim-majority country. Turkey was the first to officially recognize Israel. And under the Shah, there were even active military and intelligence exchanges. It's just such a stark contrast to today. It really is. And that contrast just underscores the pivotal shift, the one that occurred with the 1979 Iranian Revolution. The sources really highlight that under Ayatollah Khomeini, the new theocratic government, it just fundamentally reversed its stance completely. It declared Israel's existence illegitimate. And support for Palestine, well, it wasn't just a policy anymore. It became a deeply ingrained cornerstone of Iranian foreign policy.
Right.
And consequently, all trade ties severed immediately.
So following that rupture in 79, this concept of the shadow war emerged. Our sources describe it as like a continuous series of covert attacks, sabotage, proxy warfare, simmering beneath the surface ever since.
Yeah.
This includes Israel's alleged targeting of Iranian nuclear scientists' facilities. And then on the flip side, Iran's documented use of proxy forces against Israel. It's conflict fought mostly in the shadows, like you said, but with very, very real consequences.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, a key moment the sources outline was the 1982 Israeli invasion of Lebanon. That event provided a critical opening for Iran. It was then that Iran started providing significant financial military aid to Hezbollah, which then rapidly grew into this major, powerful proxy force specifically directed against Israel. It solidified a key pillar of Iran's regional strategy.
And woven into this whole fabric of shifting alliances, you've got the persistent looming issue of nuclear ambition. It's always there. The sources consistently show Israel views Iran's nuclear program as an existential threat, a fundamental danger.
Right.
Iran, on the other hand, consistently claims its program is purely peaceful, adhering to international agreements.
Right.
Meanwhile, the U.S., while it's maintained a consistent policy, prevent Iran from getting nuclear weapons, regardless of Iran's stated intentions.
Yeah.
Mainly because of the perceived destabilizing effect it would have.
Yeah, the potential ripple effects.
Exactly. Which brings us right up to the current points of contention, the specific reasons these tensions are, well, boiling over right now. And as our sources make clear, the Iranian nuclear program is still the most fundamental cause of current tension.
Absolutely.
Israel alleges Iran is secretly developing weapons, and the sources detail an escalation of alleged attacks on Iranian nuclear facilities. It really indicates Israel's determination to disrupt the program. And the U.S. remains absolutely committed to preventing Iran from acquiring nukes. It's seen as a critical national security interest.
What's fascinating here, according to the sources, is Iran's regional influence. It's really broadened through its network of proxies, groups like Hezbollah in Lebanon, Hamas in Gaza, the Houthis in Yemen. They've allowed Iran to project power across Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Yemen. This expansion of influence, rather than, say, direct territorial control, is precisely why Israel and the U.S. perceive it as such a significant, multifaceted threat, a threat to their interests and regional stability.
And the impact of Israel's ongoing operation in Gaza, you just can't overstate it. The sources highlight that the October 2023 Hamas attack and the Israeli operation that followed have undeniably intensified regional tensions.
For sure.
And given that Iran is a key supporter of Hamas, this situation gets even more complicated for Iran, especially as Israel actively targets Hamas leadership. It's indirectly challenging Iran's regional standing.
And this brings us to American involvement. The U.S. has historically been Israel's most important ally. Huge military aid, diplomatic support. What the sources seem to indicate recently is an increased U.S. involvement in what appear to be Israeli attacks on Iranian nuclear facilities.
Oh, yeah, direct participation.
Exactly. And that's viewed by analysts as shifting the nature of the conflict, really elevating the risk of a much broader regional war, because now you have a global superpower directly involved.
And let's not forget the broader U.S. strategic interests in the Middle East. They go beyond just Israel. America has deep interests in, maintaining stable oil supply, counterterrorism efforts, overall regional stability.
Standard great power concerns.
Pretty much. And Iran, with its expanding influence and its anti-U.S. rhetoric, is consistently seen by U.S. policymakers, this is clear in the sources, as a significant challenge to these core American interests in the region.
Okay, so now, with that foundational context laid out, let's zoom in a bit. Let's look at the actual chess game playing out on the ground, the distinct facets of this conflict, maybe starting with the military strategies.
Sure.
So when we look at Israel's military strategy, preemptive strikes seem key, aiming to neutralize Iran's nuclear capabilities. But our sources present a critical debate here. Do these strikes actually stop the program, or do they maybe inadvertently accelerate it by creating this national urgency?
That's the million-dollar question. Some analysts point to delays caused, others argue it galvanizes them. It's debated. Right. And Israel also heavily focuses on countering proxy warfare, actively working to weaken groups like Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis. Sources indicate that while this aims to degrade their capabilities, it often leads to unintended consequences like increased civilian casualties, maybe heightened radicalization. It creates this complex cycle.
It's a very difficult balance. And regarding their air defense, like Iron Dome, sources generally agree it's highly effective against short-range rockets. But they also highlight potential vulnerabilities against, say, larger, more sophisticated missile barrages. There are limits.
Okay, so turning to the other side, Iran's military capabilities. They've significantly advanced, especially in missile and drone tech. Do the sources indicate these pose a real threat to Israel?
Oh, absolutely. The sources indicate these advancements do pose a real and growing threat, capable of reaching targets deep inside Israel. Though, as we said, Israel's defenses are still formidable. Iran also relies heavily on asymmetrical warfare, using irregular tactics, leveraging its proxy forces, basically trying to maintain regional balance against more conventionally powerful adversaries.
Right, playing to their strength.
Exactly. And this approach, sources explain, is effective in deterring direct conventional attacks and maintaining a degree of strategic ambiguity.
And then there's the critical choke point, the Strait of Hormuz.
Yes.
Do sources confirm Iran's capability to actually close it, and what would that mean?
Sources do confirm Iran has the capability to potentially close it, or at least severely disrupt traffic. The consequences, severe. Immediate global impact on oil supply, the wider economy. I mean, a huge portion of the world's oil goes through there.
Okay. And then there's the U.S. military involvement. It's substantial. The sources detail the critical role of American bases across the Middle East, deterrence, launch pads.
Ejecting power.
Yeah. And the continuous U.S. military aid, the advanced tech flowing to Israel that significantly bolsters its capabilities, maintains its qualitative military edge. But a crucial question discussed in the sources is increased U.S. involvement in these alleged attacks on Iranian nuclear facilities, setting a precedent. Does it maybe foreshadow more direct U.S. military intervention later?
That's something analysts are watching very, very closely. It definitely raises the stakes and changes the calculation.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit. Political and aspects. International law comes up a lot. Iran and even some UN experts have alleged that attacks on Iranian nuclear facilities violate international law. Concerns about sovereignty, escalation.
That's a significant point of contention, legally and politically. Then you have the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, the NPT. Iran claims its program is peaceful, adheres to the NPT. But Israel isn't a signatory, and it's widely presumed to be the region's only nuclear power.
Right.
So this asymmetry, sources explain, really complicates diplomatic efforts. It fuels regional mistrust because you've got this uneven playing field for nuclear oversight.
Which naturally leads to the question of diplomatic solutions. Are they possible?
Well, sources mention mediation efforts, countries like Oman playing a quiet role sometimes. But these efforts, while valuable, face huge challenges. deep-seated mistrust, conflicting core interests. It makes a comprehensive resolution really elusive.
And thinking about U.S. foreign policy, the withdrawal from the JCPOA, the Iran nuclear deal under the Trump administration.
Ah, yeah. That's widely seen in the sources as having significantly escalated tensions. And it probably accelerated Iran's nuclear enrichment because they felt less bound by the deal.
Is restoring it possible?
Possible, maybe. But sources indicate it would require incredibly complex negotiations, significant concessions from everyone involved. It's a tough road back. And furthermore, the U.S.'s consistent, sort of unconditional support for Israel, while a cornerstone of its policy, is also viewed by some analysts, according to the sources, as potentially fueling the conflict, maybe reducing Israel's incentive for certain diplomatic compromises.
What about the international response? The UN, Russia, China, the EU.
Yeah.
Are their efforts making a difference?
Often hindered, is the short answer. Sources detail their reactions, but divergent interests and geopolitical rivalries make a unified, effective approach really challenging. For instance, the sources note that potential genocide or war crimes proceedings against Israel, while separate legal issues, have significantly impacted the UN Security Council's ability to adopt a joint stance on related matters. It just reflects the deep divisions there.
Got it. Okay, now, the economic aspects.
Yeah.
Always crucial. Sources clearly show how Middle East tensions consistently affect global oil prices. The Iran-Israel conflict has a particularly sharp impact, right? Given the region's role.
Absolutely. And that potential for a Strait of Hormuz closure we talked about, that's the major economic fear. Sources confirm it would severely disrupt global oil supply, trigger massive price spikes, huge pressure on the global economy, energy security.
It's not just oil, is it?
No, not at all. Sources show tensions in the Red Sea and the Strait of Hormuz are already directly impacting global shipping trade routes, causing delays, increased costs, critical for countries like India, for example.
And then there are the U.S. sanctions on Iran. What's the impact there?
Well, sources reveal they've undeniably crippled Iran's economy, limited oil exports, access to global finance. It's had a major effect. But there's a debate among analysts, Some argue the sanctions effectively limit Iran's capabilities. Others contend they've maybe inadvertently made Iran more aggressive or more resilient, pushing it towards alternative alliances or revenue streams.
Unintended consequences again.
Often the case. And ultimately, this conflict has a profound detrimental impact on the regional economies. Countries like Lebanon, Syria, Yemen, already struggling, and the proxy conflicts just exacerbate instability and poverty.
Which leads us straight into the humanitarian concerns, which are immense.
Yeah.
Civilian casualties, displacement. It's constant, tragically, across all sides and in all these proxy war zones. Aid organizations document this extensively.
It's horrific. And access to basic needs, food, water, medicine, aid sources detail severe shortages, rampant in war-torn areas, especially Gaza. It leads to dire humanitarian crises.
And there are other human rights implications too, right?
Yes, highlighted in the sources. Documented crackdowns on critics of government policies in both Iran and Israel. Impacts on freedom of expression, assembly. We also have to consider the effects on minority communities in the region, like Arabs and Kurds within Iran, who often face unique challenges amidst these heightened geopolitical tensions.
And perhaps the most terrifying, though maybe less immediate concern. The danger of nuclear radiation leaks from attacks on nuclear facilities.
It's a catastrophic risk. Sources warn of the potential environmental, human health impacts if such an event occurred. It just underscores the incredibly high stakes involved.
Okay, let's broaden the lens again. Involvement of other countries, starting regionally.
Right. Sources indicate Saudi Arabia and the Gulf states are increasingly aligning with Israel and the U.S. against Iran's growing influence. They see it as a shared threat. Their potential roles could range from financial support to maybe, in some scenarios, even direct military involvement, though that's a big step.
In countries like Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Yemen.
Unfortunately, yeah, they've become primary battlegrounds due to Iran's proxy forces. The impact on their civilian populations, their infrastructure, it's profound and devastating.
What about countries trying to de-escalate, like Jordan and Egypt?
They are advocating for de-escalation, given their proximity. But sources suggest that their diplomatic efforts, while earnest, are often constrained by the main party's entrenched positions and the broader geopolitical landscape. They have limited leverage sometimes.
Okay, now looking at global powers. China.
China has significant economic interests, especially oil imports. Sources indicate China primarily wants stability for its energy security, but stays largely neutral politically. prioritizes economic ties over overt intervention.
Russia.
Russia has strong military and economic ties with Iran. Sources suggest it generally supports Iran, which complicates de-escalation efforts, though Moscow probably wants to avoid a wider regional war, too. It's a complex relationship.
What about the European Union? France, Germany, UK, they were JCPOA signatories.
Yes, and they maintain ongoing diplomatic ties with Iran. Sources discuss their efforts to keep a diplomatic path open, but their ability to adopt a joint, decisive strategy for de-escalation is often hampered by individual national interests, internal disagreements within the EU.
And countries like Turkey and Qatar, they support groups like Hamas, have their own influence.
They play complex roles, definitely. Sources suggest their actions could either escalate tensions through direct or indirect support for certain groups, or potentially offer avenues for de-escalation depending on their own strategic calculations at the time.
And finally, the United Nations. What potential role can it play?
Potential, yes, but sources indicate the UN faces significant challenges, often constrained by Security Council vetoes, deep divisions among permanent members.
Yeah.
It really hinders its ability to adopt a joint, forceful stance on such a contentious issue.
Okay, so that leads us to, well, the potential future scenarios, which sound pretty grim based on the sources.
They are concerning, yes. Analysts, as per our sources, view them with deep concern. The possibility of this conflict escalating into a large-scale regional war, drawing in more countries, that's a very real, widely discussed threat, given how interconnected everyone is.
And another major scenario, Iran actually acquiring nuclear weapons.
If Iran succeeds, sources predict profound regional and global consequences. A potential nuclear arms race in the Middle East, a massive shift in the balance of power. It changes everything.
We also have to consider the idea of regime change in Iran. Is that something Israel and the U.S. might be aiming for, even covertly?
It's discussed in some analyses in the sources, not usually stated as explicit policy, but the question is raised. Its feasibility is highly debated, though, and sources warn of potentially chaotic, unpredictable effects on regional stability should such an attempt be made or succeed. It could unleash something worse.
And finally, the, let's say, hopeful scenario, a comprehensive diplomatic solution.
That's the hope, yes, but perhaps the most elusive scenario. A solution that genuinely addresses the core concerns of all parties involved. That would require unprecedented levels of compromise, trust building.
Yeah.
It's a very high bar.
Wow.
As you can clearly hear, the immense complexity of this conflict. It just cannot be overstated. It's a truly dynamic situation. You've got these intricately interconnected historical, political, military, economic, humanitarian dimensions all tangled up, as our sources have meticulously laid out.
So what does this all mean for you listening?
Well, it means understanding there are no simple answers here, no easy solutions, but having a deeper awareness of the forces at play, the historical roots, the current flashpoints, the myriad interconnected factors. It's absolutely essential. Essential for navigating the news, for forming your own informed perspective.
Exactly. And in a world just saturated with information, we really want to stress the importance of critical thinking. We encourage you to question assumptions, to always try and consider multiple viewpoints, just as we've tried to present them from the source material today. So here's a final thought, something for you to maybe mull over. Given this incredibly intricate web of interests, historical grievances, everything we've discussed from the sources, what single factor do you think is most likely to either tip this conflict into a wider war or conversely maybe pave the way for some kind of fragile peace? It's a heavy thought, definitely, but an important one to consider further. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We really hope you'll continue your own exploration of global affairs with a more informed and critical perspective. Until next time.